Hi there. In this QuickBooks Online video, we'll quickly look at the remaining accounts payable transactions such as checks, which are purchase invoice with the payment at the time of purchase, so a COD purchase, cash on delivery. Purchase orders, how to create them, how to fill them. Credit, so when we return something to a supplier, we'll receive a credit note, and making payments. So I'm going to quickly fire up Chrome. Again, always use Chrome for QuickBooks Online. And I'm going to go to qbo.intuit.com/reader/test drive. Again, that's the US test drive. And again, it brings me to that landscaping company that's based in California, Craig's Design and Landscaping Services. So I'm going to quickly write a check. So I'm going to purchase some items that we need for our business and pay with a check. So under expenses, new transaction, check. And again, this is for a payment at the time of purchase. It does not affect the general ledger accounts payable. Of course, it affects the subledger. It'll be listed as a transaction for that vendor, but it will not increase AP or have any effect on AP. And I'm going to buy something from Hicks. I'm going to use today's date. I'm going to have the check be numbered when I print it. So that's what print later means. So basically you can print checks in batches, they'll get numbered accordingly. We can choose the last check number. I don't ever print checks, so this method is also useful for using our debit card or something like that. So again, we're the end consumer of this particular purchase, so I'm just going to twirl the item details. We're not buying anything for resale. I'm going to be buying some new shelving for our warehouse. So we don't presently have an account for this, so I'm just going to quickly add an account. Again, category means account. So I'll click on the drop down, add new, and this is a fixed asset, and you'll see that we have leasehold improvements there. The type I'm going to leave as the same as the name. I don't need anything else. And save and close. The description for this transaction is warehouse shelving. And it costs $289.95. I'm not buying it for a customer, but we'll look at that in the future. Level 2. And notice that there's no place for a source document from the vendor, so I always just add that into the memo. Hicks Hardware. So again, that's my prefix, so I can identify transactions quickly without having to look up the vendor name. And notice down on the item here, the item details is actually populated. So what QuickBooks Online does to save you some time is they'll assume that the last transaction that you entered for a vendor will be something that will be similar to future transactions. So it populated this transaction with a bunch of items that were previously bought from Hicks Hardware. So I'm going to clear all lines. That works fine in this situation, or you can clear them one by one. So clear all lines, and that removes the details. So we should have $289.95. And I'm going to go ahead and save and new. This next transaction that I'm going to add will be a check that we write to our telephone company to pay our phone bill. I'm going to make this a recurring transaction. Now, I'm aware that we already have a recurring telephone bill payment in our list of recurring transactions. So this one is a different amount, so this will be the new amount. So when I go to recall this transaction to use the actual transaction to pay the bill, I'm going to delete the existing transaction as well, so we can see that. Of course, there's a few ways to do this, but this works just fine. So this is our telephone company. It's coming out of checking. I'll make it just today. We'll have an option to change the date of the recurring transactions when we store the recurring transaction. And the category is telephone expense. So let's see if we can quickly find that. There we go, telephone. And I'll say telephone bill or phone bill, whatever you like to say. And the amount is $125. And I'll make sure that we have nothing in our item details. And I'm going to quickly make recurring. Now, the difference between that, this transaction and what we saw with the recurring general journal transactions, we can't save the transaction and leave it on the screen and then make recurring. With checks, for some reason, we can't do that yet. They'll probably change the interface as they've done with other transactions. So I'm going to just leave this. I'll call this phone bill. It's always going to be the same. I'm not sure about how things work in California, but in where I'm at, my phone bill's always the same. And I'm just going to leave that all at its default and save template. So that saves the template. The transaction disappears. The actual check, the actual phone bill payment with a check has not been stored. It's not posted. So I go back to my gear icon to find my recurring transactions. There's the old telephone bill transaction, so maybe our amount changed or something like that, so we can just create a new one, and then I'm just going to delete that one. And I'm going to go ahead and use this one. So this is, the next date will be for October. I want to pay it for September as well. So I'm going to choose the payment date of today and save and close. And there we go. So again, we had to create the check, store it as a recurring template, then use it to post it. A little bit of a runaround, and I've noticed that they have been changing how that works with other transactions, so they'll probably change that for checks. By they I mean Intuit, the people who create this cloud-based application or work on it and maintain it. So next we'll look at purchase orders. So I'll look at a couple of ways that we can create and fill these things. So again, same place, expenses, new transaction, purchase order. There's probably another way to get to that as well, probably through the dashboard or whatever. And I'm going to buy something from Norton. And again, we've purchased stuff in the past from Norton. We're not buying this stuff again, so I'm just going to quickly clear all lines. And this stuff that we purchase will be items that we sell to customers. So that will be in the products and service. So I'm going to buy 10 bags of soil. And I'm going to buy some sprinkler heads. I'll buy 10 of those as well, and 10 pipes. Sorry, I say buy, I should say order. We're ordering that stuff. purchase order. For the date, I'm going to scroll back up and use yesterday. And then I'll fill it via a bill or a check today. So that's all that's required to enter an order. We would receive that, we'd make that order with Norton, receive the order from them, and then we would the document for the order from them, and then we'd fill it out. So I'm going to choose Save and Close. Now there's a couple of ways to add this to a bill. I'll show you those. First of all, my favorite way is just to go New Transaction, Bill. And remember, a bill is a purchase invoice on account. And I'll pick up Norton. Now notice again, those items that were on the previous purchase order popped in again. So if I use clear all lines, it'll also clear this note here about that purchase order that's available for Norton. So this time I'm going to just use my little trash cans and then add the purchase order to the bill. So the workflow would be, we'd make the order, enter the order, receive the items, including the invoice, and then enter that as a bill, and then we would owe for that amount. So again, 10 bags of everything. If we received less or more, we can make a note here. We've received the entire order in this situation. So I'm going to go ahead and Save and Close. So now if I create a bill for Norton, no little purchase order pops up on the right hand side. Nothing available. And there's those 3 items. So again, by default, the last bill or check that you entered for a vendor will be populated when you create a new bill or check for a vendor. Sometimes that can be helpful. It's kind of like a auto-recurring transaction. So now I'm going to do something very similar, but in a slightly different way. So I'm going to order some new items from a new vendor, but then we'll look at what happens when you only receive some of the items. So again, I'll go to expenses. I know it's already there, but just to be perfectly clear about how we get a purchase order. And I'm going to create a new vendor. This is our statuary. And I'll save that. Don't need to add anything else. The date is yesterday, Tuesday. And I'm buying a couple of new items. These items are created before in the very first video, but as we know, this is a session-based system, so they disappear every time we close our browser. And this will be our cherub. Category. Statues. I'm going to say we don't have any quantity on hand presently as of today, or sorry, yesterday. I shall go the day before. Sometimes that causes problems. I'll go 2 days back for that. And reorder point, I always want to make sure I have a couple of those. Three-foot cherub statue. This is a bit of a review, I'm aware. I can't remember how much we're selling those, but I'm just going to say 300. Standard taxes and cost is 150. And I'll choose save and close. And we're ordering 2 of those. And I also want a couple of dragon statues. Two days ago, order point. Let's say I want a couple of those. Oh, they're at a description. Dragon statue. Something like that, and save and close. So again, a bit of a review about how we add both vendors and inventory items on the fly. And I want 2 of those. Looks good. And I'll go ahead and save and close. So later on we received the invoice along with the items. However, we only have 1 dragon tattoo arrived, so that we're still waiting for 1 more. So there'll be 1 back ordered. So I'm going to quickly do the same thing. Again, those items pop up. I'm going to quickly add all of those. However, we only received 1 dragon. And we can save and close. So if I create a new bill for Lomeli, that remaining dragon will be available. So let's quickly look at that. I'm not going to actually enter the bill, but I'll just do it. Or Lomeli, I'm not sure how that's pronounced. That's an actual statuary in California, so maybe you know. So notice we have another item available there. I'm just going to close that. And notice that we also have a purchase order here. So we can open up that purchase order and take a look at it. So it shows us the amount received. There's no back order column, but it lets us know that this line item has been received in full. So those of you who've used the desktop version and are familiar with purchase orders on the desktop, there's a back order column, but it's expressed slightly different in the QuickBooks Online version. So I'm done with that. One thing that comes up over and over and over again as an instructor, and something that I've always wondered about when I was a student, that is what is the best way to find these transactions? And again, I always use the magnifying glass and that advanced search. So if we want to find that bill that we just entered for Norton, so what happened here is we've only received 8 bags of soil. We realized that we entered 10, but we only purchased 8. So we want to modify that bill. Basically, we entered the information incorrectly. We actually wanted 8. We received 8. We told Norton that we wanted 8, but when we entered the transaction, we put in 10. So we need to correct that or adjust it. So you see that we have the bill right there, but you can narrow this down further. So if this is several days later, it'll be harder to find this method. And in this situation, the date might be useful. The fact that it's a bill, amount, we won't know what the amount, remember what the amount is. But these are all of our bills. We could quickly find any outstanding bills. So here's our bill here. I'm just going to open that up. And also, I realized that the date was incorrect. So I entered the purchase order on the 6th, but I forgot to change that to the 7th. So I'm going to quickly change that to the 7th. And then we only ordered and received 8 bags of soil. And keep in mind that this bill has not been paid, so there's no associated payment that needs to be adjusted as well. If we had entered it as 10 and paid as 10, then a credit would be generated. And I'll choose Save and Close. And I'll say yes. They're talking about the purchase order. I'll say yes. We don't have to worry about how it affects the purchase order in this situation. So the vendor credit. So it turns out that one of the cherubs that we received from Lomely was defective. So I'm going to go and create a credit note for Lomely. So again, I can go to Expenses, New Transaction, and Vendor Credit. So this is how we process a return to a vendor. We're returning this item to the vendor. So I'm going to go to Lomely, and payment date, I like this today. And the product is one of the cherubs. And for the memo, I'm going to say statue was missing left eyebrow. That's our reason for returning. And I'll choose Save and Close. So now we have a $150 credit. So when we go to pay that bill, you'll see that we have a $150 credit available. So I'm going to quickly pay all of the folks that we owe money to, including all of the outstanding bills that were entered by the system, that is the bots that create this data or the people who create this data. So we can go to expenses, and then under the print checks we have pay bills. Shows all the outstanding bills. I'm going to choose all of them. There's that credit that we entered, so that reduces the amount that we owed. If we had already made the payment and entered the credit, it would be on the next bill. And I'm going to go ahead and Save and Close. So we paid all of those bills. Now we want to print checks. So I'm going to go ahead and print the checks. I like standard for bill payments. I like voucher for payroll. And I'll say, yes, I'm finished with setup. And I'll say the starting check number is 333. We'd actually have the stock that we're loading into our printer. So this will be 333, this will be 334. We would actually be reading the number off the stock, or we would know what the numbers are. The reason that we only have 2 checks here, even though we printed all of the rest, was because those other ones were printed at the time of payment. And I'll go ahead and preview and print. That's what our checks look like. Notice that there's no bank information, no check number. That all comes on the pre-printed checks that you get from Intuit. And print. And this is the PDF. So those will be my checks. I go ahead and print them. I actually like to save the PDF as well, so I have a copy of the check that I can quickly, if the printer jams, we can quickly reprint. And I'm all set. So that was a bit of a long video looking at all of the transactions remaining for accounts payable. Thanks so much for watching.